Hello, this is Amitha Balachandra. This is a 6:30 p.m. show that I do every single day. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today we're going to be talking about Delhi's air pollution because it's at its highest since November. And we're going to put up some data on the screens right now. You'll see that Delhi's air quality index is at 486, that is between 400 and 500, is severe, which means that the pollution levels can cause issues and problems to people who are healthy, and people who already have underlying issues will face further problems. In fact, there is not so much good news because the IMD has now said that going forward in the next couple of days, things are not going to improve. The other piece of information that's also come in is that according to data by the Punjab Remote Sensing Center, around 40,000 incidents of stubble burning have been reported so far this year. Not just that. And the reason I'm bringing that up is also because according to reports that have come today, the contribution of stubble burning in Delhi's pollution is nearly 40%. Last year, it was about 44%. And according to SUFFER, 3,261 farm fires were reported over Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, and Uttarakhand. There's also information that farmer leaders have now said that stubble burning in Punjab will continue over the next 10 days at least until the Kharif harvesting is done. Now, we're going to be talking about a couple of things today. One is why are farmers blamed every year and why it's not fair to do so for air pollution every year. Second, what are the measures taken by the government so far? Has it been effective at all? And third, what policy measures, and these are long-term policy measures that are needed so we can actually control the situation going forward at least. And to talk about that, I have with me Vimlendu Jha, who's an environmentalist and the founder of Swecha, who's joining me right now. Thank you so much for talking to us and making time. Mr. Jha, my first question is, unfortunately, every year around this time, during the winters, is when we talk about air pollution in Delhi, which is sort of unfortunate, but also this time around, there's information that's coming just today saying that stubble burning levels are and air pollution is because of 40% contribution to stubble burning. Tell us why this is the case and why it's unfair to blame farmers every year.
So no doubt stubble burning has a major contribution to make to Delhi's ambient air quality. And you're right that this morning air quality index, so if you look at stubble burning and its contribution as per suffer data, it was almost 40%. So on any given day, because it's an episodic form of source of pollution, the contribution of stubble burning can range from 2% to 5% to 40% that we had this morning. And this was this season's maximum. And of course, there's no doubt, no environmentalist or no sane thinking concerned citizen or an expert on environment will tell you that stubble burning is good. Stubble burning is bad. Stubble burning needs to be stopped. But we also need to look at two things. One is stubble burning the only source of pollution? No. As I said earlier, stubble burning is an episodic source of pollution. It occurs for around 30 to 45 days in a year. And then there are these continuous sources of pollution, which actually exist 365 days a year. So, of course, in this month, stubble burning will have a major contribution. Also, depending on the wind speed, for example, the last 24 hours, the air quality index in Delhi became very, very severe, primarily not just because, there was an overnight spike in stubble burning, but because of low wind speed and also containment. The dispersal capacity of Delhi is very, very limited. And because of that, the pollution stays. So when we say pollution stays, which means that the local sources of pollution in Delhi that exist and pollute 365 days a year, they are more dangerous or as dangerous as stubble burning. Of course, my point of contention or my opposition is to the thought that rather than solely, shifting the narrative and only talking about stubble burning, which indeed needs to be stopped, we need to really look at a 360 degrees understanding, a holistic understanding, a comprehensive understanding, a collective understanding of all the sources of pollution. Because unless and until we actually acknowledge what the problem is, unless and until we understand what are the various sources of pollution, we will not be able to solve the problem, because it becomes a very convenient political narrative to really blame the farmers alone. And we need to understand, why are the farmers burning the stubble? This is not an old tradition. It all started because of lack of water, because of which the sowing month got shifted. The reason why the farmers actually grow wheat when they don't even eat rice, when they don't even eat rice, there's almost 11 million tons of wheat rice that is actually exported in our country, is because there's minimum, there's guaranteed price that is provided by the government. So there's lack of water, there's guaranteed price that poor farmers actually get for to grow rice. There's not enough incentive or infrastructure for the farmers, and then we expect that the entire environmentalism or the responsibility to combat air pollution or to maintain ambient air quality of Delhi NCR should be on citizens, is very, very unfortunate. Like, imagine in Delhi, as I said, almost 30% of Delhi's air quality is because of vehicles. There's construction and demolition dust, there's roadside dust, there's open burning of garbage. There are at least 12 coal thermal power plants in the immediate periphery of Delhi. There are thousands and thousands of trucks. There's all kinds of menace. There are hundreds and hundreds of industries. There are 13 hotspots, by the way, that are more polluting than anything that you would have ever imagined. So I would say that in the month of October, we wake up to air pollution, and we waste our time only discussing a issue called stubble burning, unless and until we discuss 365 days of air, unless and until we discuss all the issues of air pollution, we won't be able to find a solution to this crisis.
In fact, very rightly you pointed out vehicular pollution, industrial pollution. I'm going to take in other sources of pollution as well. But I also want to ask you this, and this is one of the things that's coming from Nishant Suman. He's echoing similar thoughts. He says, isn't it wrong to purely blame farmers for this pollution? In fact, Harish Vadgama has been very kind enough to also contribute in this conversation. Thank you so much for that contribution. But I want to ask you this. Every year you see blame game between Delhi and neighboring states. And this year itself, Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal has gone on to say that farmers are not being provided with enough alternatives. I want to take one step back to the beginning of October, where there was talk about a biodecomposing process. Is that a solution?
See, that could be a solution, but we need to understand that if we only look for band-aid solution for a problem like stubble burning, which is really, really extreme, which is deep-rooted, which is linked to agriculture practice, crop practice, guaranteed price, water scarcity, unless and until we look at that, as you know, my problem with what Arvind Kejriwal said, or decomposer, or many of these issues, is that in the interim, you might be able to solve the crisis. In the interim, you might be able to do it. But why don't we go to the root cause of it? So, fix your stomach so that you don't have a skin ulcer or something coming out on your skin. The root cause of the problem is, as I said, the entire crop pattern that we have in our country. And these are not just bad for air, as I said, this is also bad for water. Also, Delhi is not someone that needs to lead on decomposer. Delhi hardly has any stubble or stubble burning incidences. These activities, or the sharing of knowledge, or this kind of a discovery, invention, science should actually happen in Punjab, Haryana, and Uttar Pradesh, where the maximum amount of stubble burning happens. And the other thing is that why have this announcement on the eve of your, of stubble burning? In the sense, imagine October first week is when our political class woke up to prove that they're serious about this, while they should have done this 3 months ago or 6 months ago. In fact, imagine, while we have been in COVID times, and every science tells us that COVID plus air pollution is double whammy, is really, really lethal, our government should have thought through this. So rather than just coming up with these fancy press releases by the central government and the respective state governments, I don't see any merit. I see face-saving posturing and PR when on the eve of bad air day, you have our political class come and say, oh, well, they have a solution. That's not a solution.
In fact, let me take this a little further. One of our viewers has asked in this question. Sukun says, Mr. Jha said, Delhi doesn't have disposing method to pollution. Can I understand that, and how can it be changed?
No, so that's the dispersing capacity. That's an atmospheric term that I had used. It's about the Delhi is a landlocked state in that sense. There's a lot of urbanization. We talk about the climatic atmospheric condition of Delhi, because of which air gets trapped, and therefore dispersal capacity of air is very, very limited. So, and that's the reason why the in-house pollution plays a very, very important role. And if you look at NGT, Supreme Court, most of the studies have actually said that these 13 hotspots that we have, the industrial hubs that we have, actually play a very, very important role. So, which means that if Delhi pollutes, and if there's a bad air day, which means a no air day in that sense, all the pollution gets contained in the lower surface of Delhi, and that's the day when things become really, really worse. So this morning, if the AQI was almost 430, 440 in
Yeah.
different areas, if you look at the IMD report, it clearly says that there was low wind and there was a lot of accumulation of pollutants in the lower strata of our atmosphere over Delhi. So that's what it primarily means, scientifically speaking.
In fact, the chart that we're looking at is by the Central Pollution Control Board, where it says Anand Vihar is at 460. It's in the severe category. It's between Delhi and Ghaziabad. It's on the border. In fact, there's an interstate bus station, and hence you'll see that number is at 460.
There are
I
two
also
other
want to
things
ask
there.
you.
There are two other things that
Yes.
we need to tell people about
Yeah.
Anand Vihar. It's not just about just the
Yes.
bus terminal. There's the big
Yes.
Ghazipur landfill that we have. That
Yes.
almost,
Absolutely.
we're talking about 5,000 metric tons of garbage that is dumped there every day, and a lot of it is
Hmm.
burnt there, and has been that landfill has been on fire for 20 years. That's one. And the
Yeah.
other is there's something called waste to energy plant that we already have there, and a new part of it has been inaugurated by the chief minister, which again is extremely polluting. So Anand Vihar is another hotspot. So that's what I'm saying, that if it's the farmers that are the main contributors, why should the AQI of India Gate on any given day be around 250, and of Anand Vihar, which is further down, be 450, which basically means that it's local, it's hyper local. A lot of sources of pollution in Delhi are very local, very hyper local. And indeed, there is wind and there's stubble burning.
So let's talk about other sources of pollution as well. We spoke about stubble burning. I want to also talk about firecrackers. For instance, Diwali is around the corner. Dashara just got over. One of our viewers is also asking this question. Saifur says, how much does Diwali contribute to pollution? Some people deny it because it's a religious concern, but what does science say? Is there a clear increase in pollution as a result? We also know that Delhi Chief Minister, as of today, has said, please do not burst firecrackers.
Yeah, just half an hour ago, Delhi Chief Minister has actually put a ban on
Yeah.
bursting of firecrackers, and several states today, in fact, fortunately, Calcutta High Court has also put a ban, and Rajasthan has also put a ban. There should not be any science or any kind of a question whether firecrackers pollute or not. Indeed, firecrackers pollute, and you and I and everyone else are witness to that. On every study that's been done by WHO or everyone, we know that air pollution increases almost 20 times, 25 times on Diwali night. In fact, last night was Karwa Chauth, and we've actually seen AQI go down so badly this morning. Of course, not all of it could be attributed to firecrackers. So fairly simple. Of course, firecrackers are chemicals, they are metals, there are different kinds of pollutants that is put on fire, and they're extremely polluting, and they should be banned. When your Delhi's AQI is already 450, you can't really afford to really do anything that could add to it. So if I was okay with firecrackers if Delhi's AQI was 50 or 60 or 100. We're talking about 500. Imagine last year on Diwali night, despite the Supreme Court ban on firecrackers, the AQI levels went beyond 1,000. In previous years, it had actually gone up to almost 20, 25 times. So forget about what religious sentiment is, and our religion doesn't tell us to kill ourselves. Our Deepavali is a festival of lights. It's not festival of firecrackers. The business of firecrackers told you that, firecrackers are part of our tradition. No, they're not. And not when every second child has asthma in Delhi, not when your city is in ICU. I should also tell your listeners and your viewers that cities get evacuated. Modern societies, good civilizations, they evacuate their cities when AQI reaches 200, 250. And here we are discussing 450, thinking it's all normal. Will be normal sitting and chatting and sipping chai when the AQI reaches 900, 950 as well. Very unfortunate. I think we need to do everything that is under our command. There must be some reason why Supreme Court of our country has put a ban on firecrackers. And the last point with regard to firecrackers, this entire green firecrackers is a farce. A lot of, Supreme Court said that you're allowed to use green firecrackers. No, just because an aloo bomb that you use is green in color, that doesn't make it eco-friendly. A green firecracker is 30% less polluting, but it is still 70% polluting, and it still is extremely, extremely fatal for us. And on a normal day, a firecracker is bad for our environment and bad for our health. Imagine in COVID times, what kind of a havoc this is going to cause. So we need to really stay away and stay cautious.
Absolutely. I was going to, yes. I was going to come to that. In fact, how much worse is it going to get for not just COVID-19 patients, but also people who have underlying problems? Because one of the doctors who had come on our shows earlier had said that one of the things that they say is to ask if they have underlying problems, and that's how they differentiate. But there are studies, and now more than one, to say that it's going to get worse for residents of Delhi because of COVID.
Absolutely. So imagine if you just go on Google and look at ICU beds on Diwali night for last 4 years. Hospitals had run out of ICU beds or ventilators on a normal Diwali night last 3-4 years. This year, when imagine almost 70 to 80% of hospital beds and ICUs and ventilators are already reserved for COVID. Imagine if we still do what we are used to doing, what's the situation? People are going to die. That's point number one. So our health infrastructure cannot really take more and more people with respiratory disorders and emergencies. That's one. Two, we all know, what does COVID affect the most? COVID affects our respiratory system, our respiratory capacity, our respiratory organs. And that's exactly what air pollution does. Air pollution makes breathing difficult. And imagine, to a normal human being, a COVID and air pollution is affecting so much. And if every second child has breathing issues, and we're talking about asthma, if you already have comorbidity and heart and other ailments, it's going to be fatal. It's like, you're self-destructive if you even think that let me do it for some joy. No, our gods and goddesses are not going to get happy with our stupidity in times like COVID. On a normal day also, I will say, don't you do it. On a COVID day, not at all.
I also want your comment on the number of measures that the government has come up with. Do you believe that these are just short-term measures? There is smoke towers. In fact, today, a couple of days ago, the chief minister said that they will be banning manufacturing industries in new industrial areas. Do you believe that these are just short-term measures?
I think, you know what, as in half of it is pseudoscience. Like smoke towers, for example, it hasn't worked. There's no evidence. And I have spoken very vehemently against Supreme Court also. The fact that, imagine you spending Delhi government's environment budget is around 52 crores for a year out of its 65,000 crore budget. Out of that 65,000 crore, 52 crore for environment. Out of 52 crore, 20 crore for a smoke tower for Connaught Place. And a smoke tower, which we don't have any evidence in our country to know whether it helps or not. So, all the smoke towers and smoke guns that were actually installed by NEERI and a couple of other institutions in the last 3 years, many of them have stopped working. Many of them have been dismantled. There's no scientific data to say that smoke towers solves a problem. And imagine if it does, if you have to believe that it does, how many smoke towers will we actually need? So the solution cannot be that let's continue our pollution and then put in a big exhaust fan or a filter on top of Delhi's sky. to take all our bad air away. No, you have to go to the source of pollution, because we cannot ever continue doing business as usual and then think that we can actually sort it, or run that air through a filter or through an exhaust and solve it. With regard to the industrial policy, again, it sounds good on paper, but several studies say that yes, these things should have happened. Decongestion of industrial activities should have happened much earlier. If you go to the AQI map of Delhi, you will see places like Burari, places like Mundka, places like Narela. These are the hotspots. Wazirpur. What are these areas? These areas are not areas where everyone is, having fun. These are industrial hubs, and the chief minister hasn't said anything about what happens to the existing polluting industries. So fine, new industries won't come, but what about the old ones that continue to pollute? And we need to work on that.
And also, I want your comment then on what policy changes do you want to see going forward? Because we also know that the center brought in a new law recently, where it said that 20 commission members will look after the air quality management, and non-compliance will lead to 5-year jail term or 1 crore rupees fine, or both. Is that a strong deterrent, or you believe that there should be, a major policy change?
So first, I'll speak about this new commission, this new thing that we have. It's not as if we didn't have laws.
Yes.
You think this suddenly last week India woke up to a law, and the only law that's going to solve all our crisis? No. There are hundreds and hundreds of laws and provisions and institutions. There's something called Ministry of Environment and Forest. There's something called Central Pollution Control Board, and every state has state pollution control boards. There is there was something called EPCA, and many of these provisions that they're actually talking about as per this new commission through this ordinance was already there. So I don't think that this is so fundamentally different from, and suddenly things are going to shift. And also, what I don't understand is 1 crore fine. As in, imagine a huge industry can give that fine of just 1 crore. Why should there be a ceiling on just 1 crore? As in, polluter pays, but why just that much when you could be a bigger polluter? Also, the problem with this particular commission is, and if you read that document, it is very top heavy. Mostly joint secretaries, mostly chief secretaries. We need to understand that why has environmental governance failed in our country? Why has EPCA failed or CPCB failed? They failed for two primary reasons. One, it cannot be senior bureaucrats. It has to be your grassroots executive. It has to be your nodal officer. It has to be your block level, village level, district level bureaucracy or executive that needs to be given the responsibility, task, accountability, and leadership to manage pollution issues. That's point number one. Point number two is it cannot just be by passing these fancy orders and circulars. You need to fund your environmental governance system. Imagine 65,000 crores, Delhi government's budget, only 52 crores for environment or for air pollution. Central Pollution Control Board, such a huge country, only 100 crores for entire country to actually monitor. And there's already a deficit of almost 100, 200 staffs in all these, there are 37 government officials in Delhi by DPCC to actually go and challan and monitor 1,400 square kilometers of Delhi. So it has to be, top light and at the grassroots level, and there needs to be political will and funds given to actual governance. Because otherwise, imagine 22 years of EPCA, similar laws, it was also a Supreme Court monitored authority. It could also jail anybody. Not a single case actually went, that EPCA didn't take a single case to the magistrate. Not a single person has been convicted by that particular law. So the joy, the masala is not in a law, it's actually in implementation. Point number two, your question is what should governments do? It's very obvious. It cannot be odd even, or it cannot be sprinkling water one day on a pile of fire. It cannot be engine on, off. These are point number 25, point number 27 solutions. Solution number one is public transport. When you know that 30% of Delhi's pollution actually is from vehicles, almost 70% of PM 2.5 is vehicular pollution. Why do we have a deficit of 5,000 buses when Supreme Court has actually said several times? And between Delhi government and central government and between their blamery and blame game, we have a deficit of 5,000 buses. So first solution is strengthen public transport. We have 1 crore vehicles. We cannot depend on private mobility. And it is okay, as in there's been improvement, there's BS6 that's come, but still it's a lot of pollutants that we're talking about, two-wheelers and four-wheelers in that sense. Second very, very important thing that the government needs to do is this entire pavement and green management and construction. As in dust, 70% of dust actually, contribution of PM10 is from dust. And we've seen the broken roads, the pile of garbage, the broken pavements, construction activities, which is going on everywhere. That needs to be controlled. And this entire tree management, like the thousands and thousands of trees that's actually been cut in Delhi. And the government says that they have planted millions of trees. Where are those millions of saplings? We don't really know. But we see, as in, we were part of this entire protest when there were almost 15,000 trees that were actually being cut in South Delhi for Sarojini Nagar project. And there are many such projects. Government of India has cut 1 crore trees in last 1 year in that sense in different parts of country. So we need to understand that the only inexpensive source of absorbing dust and managing our air is trees. That's the best smoke tower and best air purifier. We need to stop cutting our trees in the name of infrastructure and development. And then open burning of garbage. Municipalities, as in what the hell? Swachh Bharat is not just about putting your photo up there on a billboard. Swachh Bharat is not just about grooming. It's about making sure that the municipalities are funded, municipalities are accountable, and your landfills are not on fire. And that's what we actually end up seeing all the time. So it's again, we need to look at waste management, and in 70-kilometer radius, as I said earlier, coal thermal power plants. India's commitment to global community needs to be actually exercised. We cannot be burning coal. We cannot be exporting coal. Delhi has blocked has banned its thermal power plants. But how does it matter? As there's no toll for bad air. Bad air from 50 kilometers from Delhi can just enter without Arvind Kejriwal's visa in that sense. So we need to have an airshed approach to air pollution.
So very, very clear points that's been made by Mr. Jha. I'm just going to wrap up for our viewers. One is that you need to look at public transport, you need to look at green tree management, you need to look at waste management, you need to stop cutting trees. That's a very important point that Mr. Vimlendu Jha made. And these small measures of smoke towers, which Mr. Jha says has not worked, and new industries, not coming up, all of those things won't work. And it's time for the government, for everyone to stop just blaming farmers, because it's not just the problem of stubble burning, but there are other sources of pollution as well. I hope we'll be able to have more of these conversations going forward, and not just during the winters, but all year around. Thank you so much for joining us. And for viewers who are watching, take a short break and come back at 8 o'clock, because Faye is going to be doing a conversation on the protests that are happening in Goa against the 3 infrastructure projects, where citizens have been protesting since June. It's called the Save Mole protest. Please tune into that conversation at 8 o'clock.